Well, hey, welcome to Crosspoint. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Vince, and today I'll be your guide. Now, do you know any mean people? Have you ever found that in an attempt to not be like them, you discover that you're actually becoming more and more like someone you don't even like? Well, there's a better way, and today we're going to talk about the spark that can not only ignite a change of trajectory in them, but also in you. But before we jump into it, we'd love to hear from you today. And the best way to do that is to scan the QR code and fill out the digital connection card, because we'd like to just do that, connect with you. And if you're a guest, you can check this out. We'll drop a gift to you this week in the mail just for joining us today. Now, as you're doing that, a couple ways to connect around here this week. First, next weekend, Crosspoint is going online only. That's right. Next weekend, we're going to be online only in light of the long holiday weekend, and to show our appreciation for the incredible volunteers who serve here each Thursday and Sunday. So we're hosting an online service for July 2nd, and we will not be hosting an in-person service for children, students, or adults over the Independence Day weekend. So enjoy the holiday weekend and tune in from wherever you're celebrating. Second, CSM, Crosspoint Student Ministries, is headed to Kings Island on Saturday, July 15th. This will be tons of fun and a great opportunity to invite a friend. So, if you're a student or have a student that is in 7th through 12th grade, they can register right here today. And don't forget to also check out our crosspointweb.org/students for all the summer opportunities to connect, volunteer, and grow. So don't miss any of the action. And speaking of kids and students, have you ever wondered what the faith of the next generation is worth? We think it's a lot. In fact, our church is committed to fueling the faith of the next generation, and it takes real people like you to help kids and students find their way to God. Would you be willing to join us? If so, we'd love to help get you connected to one of our amazing volunteer teams in Crosspoint's kids and students. You can let us know on this QR code, and when you do that, you'll be joining an awesome group of game changers that are helping our kids and students discover how to know and follow Jesus. And as someone who serves back there in each month, I can tell you, you'll be really glad that you did. All right, we've got a great service for you today. Today we're going to be looking at one simple idea, one spark that has the secret power to create change and bring good into the world in some pretty fantastic ways. So if you're looking to make not only your world, but the world around you a better place, you're in the right place. So to get us headed in that direction, Brad and the Crosspoint Band have a great song from a classic rocker who knows a bit about bringing some kindness into the world. While he's known for one of his classic hits, You Give Love a Bad Name, he's also known for doing a world of good through the JBJ Soul Kitchen, which is a nonprofit community restaurant run by John Bon Jovi's Soul Foundation that serves in-need customers in Newark and New Jersey and the surrounding community. So, here's where it all started.
Shot to the heart, and you're to blame, darling. You give love a bad name.
Let's give it up for these guys. My word. Come on, how many times you get to go to church and hear Bon Jovi, right? Like, how cool is that? Man, I tell you what, I play my part, you play your game, you give love a bad name. Well, we're excited to kick off this series, Spark, and we're going to be igniting some things in our lives. And this weekend, we're going to be talking about something that really is the antithesis of this, that how do we ignite things that actually bring about goodness in our world? And so, welcome to Crosspoint. My name's Curt. If we haven't had a chance to meet, it's great to have you here with us. And if it's your first time, we hope it's your first of many times with us here at Crosspoint. And let's make some noise for those tuning in online this weekend. Maybe you're at the lake, at the beach, in a bar, in a coffee shop. So excited to have you joining us. And I want to begin telling you a story about where we're heading tonight that I hope will set this up. A couple weeks ago, my wife and I got away for a little trip to the Northeast coast for my 50th birthday. I had a 50th birthday recently. I know I look all at 33, but I'm 50. And so on our flight home out of Newark, we loaded onto the plane, and it was a very low flight. Like there's maybe a third full on the flight. So we're cheap. I'm cheap, so I don't like to buy seats, that I have to pay for it. They can just assign me one. So I just let them assign me a seat. And for whatever reason on this flight, they put us all in these like 4 or 5 rows. Everybody who didn't buy a seat, they jammed us in shoulder to shoulder, in like rows 23 to 26. And we were one of the last ones to get on the flight. So, we're like, hey, we're just going to walk to the back because there's like 10 empty rows and find an empty row. And the flight attendant, as I'm going by, she looks at my device and she's like, oh, your seat's right here. I'm like, oh, well, we're just going to like go back here and, find an empty row. She's like, no, your seat is right here. I'm like, yeah, but like there's like 12 rows open back here. She's like, sir, this is your seat. And so I just kind of played along, and, there's a lot of things I could have said. Wish I would have said it, at least at the moment. And, I don't know, 3-4 minutes later after they shut the door, she said, all right, sir, I'm going to let you move. And she gave me the option to move back a row or up to, the exit row, which I'm like, we'll absolutely take the exit row, leg room. And so, when we come up to that row, she's like, that's fine. She's like, read this, and then I'm going to give you a test at the end. I'm like, kind of laughing up, like, all right, we sat in the exit row a few times. She's like, no, seriously, read this, and I'm going to give you a test. And so, we read the little pamphlet, at least it looked like we were, and, they shut all the doors and get ready to take off. And she's like, all right, I'm giving you the test. And apparently I flunked the test. She said my answers were wrong. And, she was just like all business. And then to top it off, when she sits down in her seat, she's sitting in front of us facing the rear. And right, so she's just sitting there looking at us, and we're looking at her, and it's just my wife, Julie, and I, and everybody else is behind us. And so I had a choice, and I'm not the kind of person that likes to stir up conversation when I'm a flight. I'm like an introvert, so I usually just kind of settle in. But for whatever reason, I just kind of felt in my spirit that I should, say something and maybe create a connection with her. So, she's just staring at us, and I'm like, well, is this like a normal leg for you? And she's like, oh no, I don't usually do this leg. I'm like, all right, good talk. And so then I said, well, are you from New York? Or are you head home? And she's like, nope, neither. I'm like, all right, well, you sound like you have like a New York accent. And she's like, well, I used to live, in upstate New York, but now I live in Florida. I'm like, oh, okay. So is this your normal, leg? Or, or you just pick up a flight? She's like, no, actually, I've needed to pick some flights up. And I'm like, okay. And Julie and I, are just trying to connect with her. And before long, she tells us that she just had, spinal fusion surgery like a year ago. And started talking about how painful that was. And of course, we're, trying to just understand what she'd gone through. And she's beginning to open up a little bit. And, she said, I just graduated actually from therapy, from, rehab. And so I've just been back, flying for the last, 2 or 3 weeks. And then she said, I'm so excited to be back because, in a couple weeks I get to fly up. My kids live in upstate New York, and I get to take my grandkids back to my place in Florida, and we're going to spend 2 weeks together. And all of a sudden, it just hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, this lady that was all business, just going through life, not overly seeming to enjoy herself. Something as simple as a couple questions, taking interest in her, all of a sudden, it sparked something, and all of a sudden, she became a real person in front of us. She's no longer just about the business. She's a grandmother. She's somebody who had needs. She's somebody who was talking like a normal person. And it just kind of blew me away. And as I thought about that, I thought we've probably all had moments like that. I mean, have you ever stood in front of a waiter or a cashier, that just, looked beyond stress? I mean, weighed down perhaps by life. And you just flashed a smile and something just lifted in their spirit. And so I want to talk about this weekend. I want us to look at the spark, the secret weapon of kindness. And as we do this, Greg Atkinson wrote a brand new book. It's called The Secret Power of Kindness. And he says this, he says, kindness is a secret weapon. It disarms people and it breaks down their defensive walls. I mean, it's something as simple as a smile, something as kind as a compliment, something as simple as affirming someone, asking how they're doing, asking about their day, taking interest in them, thanking people. I mean, I've just been discovering through multiple encounters over the last few weeks, I mean, this can turn somebody's day, perhaps even their week, their month, and even their year. In fact, when you think about this word, humankind, which, kind of represents all of us, what if we thought of this word as two words right here? I mean, because the kindness is like embedded into this phrase when we separate it into two words, but it just seems that too often, this is like a lost art form right here. And so as we begin this series, Spark, ideas that change things, I want us to think about this whole idea of kindness today and how this moves the needle. And let me just state the obvious real quick, because some of you are going, I thought we were talking about new things. Well, this is actually not a new idea, right? Kindness, it might even to you be a bit old-fashioned, but I think it's incredibly powerful because I think kindness is actually omni-relevant. Meaning, I think it's relevant at any given time. In fact, I love how Ivan Pavlov put it. This is a guy that's like he was a neurosurgeon, psychologist, the guy of like Pavlov dog fame and, like stimulus response fame. He said, if you want new ideas, he said, read old books and they'll ignite something in you. I think the same is true with virtues. I think if we want new things, sometimes we got to look at some of these tried and true virtues and just see, okay, what does this do if we lean into this? How does this begin to spark something in us? In fact, I learned something a number of years ago from a guy by the name of Mark Batterson, and it's kind of a theory for everything that, the answer to kind of every prayer that I have is actually just, God, I want more and more of your spirit right here. All right, to which you might go, okay, but how does that get you the answers to some of your prayers? What about like when you need more peace or when you need more joy or happiness? Well, those are actually all fruit of the Spirit, just like kindness is actually one of the fruit of the Spirit. And so, again, I just think the more we go after God's Spirit, the more and more we actually experience these virtues. And I think we would all agree that, when you are around somebody that just has kindness, like is clothed with kindness, it's like you never want to leave them, right? I mean, we've probably all had people in our lives, and as I talk to friends, as I think about my own experiences, I mean, I can tell you the one thing that has made the difference in my life is when somebody does something that's just simple, pure kindness that just stands out. It's like, oh my gosh, that virtue, that value above any other leaves a mark. It leaves a mark. And so why is this such a powerful concept, this idea of kindness? Well, I think part of it is because it's found in the reflection of our Heavenly Father. In fact, God actually mirrors this virtue in his reputation. In fact, we're going to look at something the Apostle Paul says in just a moment in Romans chapter 2. And if you're newer to Crosspoint, we like to talk about the Apostle Paul a lot around here. And we like Jesus too, but Paul wrote more than half of the New Testament. And Paul's the kind of guy that if like you're new to church, you're not sure about faith, Paul wasn't either. He didn't grow up in this. In fact, he was against Jesus. He was against Christians. He was arresting them, putting them into prison. He was trying to kind of push down the movement of Jesus until he became one. He all of a sudden just had a day where he changed his mind, where he did an about face, and then he began to try to tell as many people as possible. And so we see why that's the case in this verse right here. And one of the reasons is because of what he says right here. He says, God's kindness actually is the thing that leads you to repentance, which I think is Paul's story. He's like, I wasn't a fan, but repentance actually means to change your mind, to have a different mindset. He says, all of a sudden, I recognize God's kindness, and it caused something to change in me. Meaning one of God's greatest tools for change is that he shows us his kindness. And if that doesn't work, you know what he does after that? He shows us more and more kindness. And perhaps we can learn something from this and follow suit. In fact, we see this like over and over and over again in the life of Jesus. In fact, there was one episode in Jesus' life when he was interacting with his team, and they were kind of on their final descent into the city of Jerusalem. At least Jesus knew it was. The team didn't know that. Jesus talking about things like, hey, guys, some horrible things are going to happen when we get here. I just want you to be prepared. And they're like, Jesus, why do you keep talking like that? Why do you keep talking crazy? Like, nothing's going to happen. I mean, if we're with you, what could go wrong? And so this is like the days right before, he's arrested and tried and goes to the cross. And then so Jesus says, hey, guys, I just want to leave something new with you. I got a new idea for you, a new command, and I just want to give it to you. And so here's what it is. He says, I just simply want you to love one another, to which they're all like, Jesus, we've heard that before. Like, we've talked about this before. That's nothing new. And I think he just looks at them. He's like, guys, I'm not through. Give me a moment. And in this next moment, it's almost like he's being super clear with them. He wasn't just commanding them to feel something. All right, he's commanding them to actually do something. And what he says next is actually the thing that, in my opinion, changed the world from that day forward. Because what he said next, it trumped the golden rule, love others the way you want to be loved. It trumped the great commandment, to love God, love others. He looks at them and he says, guys, as I have loved you, so I just want you to love other people that way. And this is so disturbing right here. Because he, in this moment, he establishes himself as the standard for kindness. He establishes himself as the standard for love. And he's just trying to be real simple. Not simple as in easy, but simple as in super clear. He's like, if you want to spark something amazing, it starts right here. I just want you to love others the way I've loved you. Now, if we put ourselves in the shoes of Jesus' team at this moment, they're a bit at a disadvantage to you and I. Because see, you and I, when we hear this, we immediately go to thinking about the cross. We think about what Jesus did on the cross, the extravagant, ridiculous level of love he showed us there. But see, these guys, they didn't have that context. That hadn't happened yet. Instead, they started thinking about all the things that had happened in their life over the last 3 years, up to that point. I mean, Jesus could have gone around the circle, one by one, and just said, hey, what's this looked like for you? And what's this looked like for you? I mean, he could have said, hey, Matthew, listen, do you remember what you were up to when we met? And Matthew would have been like, oh, yeah, I remember exactly what I was doing. I was working as a government-sanctioned thief with bodyguards. I mean, that's how horrible I was. I was stealing people's money on behalf of Rome. I could take whatever I wanted. Nobody wanted to be around me. It was horrible. Matthew, do you remember what I said to you the moment I invited you to join me? Absolutely. Absolutely. You just said, hey, would you be willing to leave everything you're doing right here? Would you just walk away from this and follow me? And nobody had ever done that before. Jesus, I remember how you stood in my court. I remember how you accepted me. You gave me a place to belong. I'd never been invited like that before. I remember the moment you stuck out, your neck for me. I remember when you defended me. When you loaned me, you let me ride on your coattails. That one time, and I'm sure there were others. That one time when, all the religious leaders were coming down hard on you and questioning your integrity, and they're trying to take me down, and you just let me glide on the strength of your coattails. And it's Jesus says, hey, exactly. That's exactly, Matthew, that's exactly what I want you to do for every single person you meet. I want that to be the reputation that you're known for, to just kind of treat people that way. He could have worked the entire room. He could have gone around the circle of that entire room, just saying, hey, I want you to extend the same kindness you've received from me. I want you to extend the same kindness you've received from me. I'm sure Matthew would have piped up and said, hey, in my case, it wasn't just one time. It wasn't 2 times, it wasn't 3 times, it wasn't 10 times, it's 100 times over. And then later that night, while they were gathered in a room, Jesus looked around. He said, hey, gentlemen, listen, if you think you've seen me love up to this point, listen, you haven't seen anything yet. Because tomorrow I'm going to be covered in my blood. They had no idea what he was talking about. Tomorrow I'm going to put on a demonstration that's going to not only take your breath away, but more importantly, it's going to take your sin away. And it's going to take your excuses away. Because tomorrow I'm going to give my life away. That is ridiculous kindness right there. See, I think that's exactly what Paul meant when he said that his, meaning Jesus' kindness, is meant to lead us to repentance, which means a change of mind, a change of thought, a change in the way that we think about things. And so I want to give us a good definition for kindness. So we have something we can take to the bank. So here's how I want us to think about this spark right here, this idea of what if we just did this in our life? Kindness is when you loan someone your strength instead of reminding them of their weakness. It's when you loan someone your strength instead of reminding them of their weakness. I want to give you 2 quick hitters on this, 2 ways, because, man, you have opportunities every single day. I mean, you walk out of this space, you're going to have the chance to do some of the things we're going to talk about right here. Tuning online, the moment you shut your computer, you shut your device off, you're going to have the chance to walk these things out. And so here's one of the first ways we can walk this out. Number 1 is when we loan our strength through a kind word. Man, words are powerful. Words are powerful. In fact, the great writer of wisdom that we find in the Old Testament book of Proverbs, he tells us just how powerful these words are. Look at what he says right here. He says, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it, he says, they're going to eat its fruit. He said, the tongue has the power of life and death. I mean, think about this. He's saying you actually have the ability to speak life and to speak death into people. And you have the ability to speak life and speak death into situations and into circumstances. You and I have the opportunity to speak life or to speak death into moments where we're with our friends or with our employees. He says you have moments to speak life and death into the people closest to you, the people, your children, your spouse, the people in your very home. I mean, think about this for a moment. If you're a parent, I mean, parents of children, listen, here's the thing, and you probably know this already, but your kids, they know when they failed, right? I mean, when they make a mistake, when they fail, I mean, you can see it in them. I mean, they feel it in their body. And moms, let me just tell you, your words weigh like 100 pounds to them. And dads, our words, for whatever reason, weigh like 500 pounds. I don't know why it is, but it's just true. And so through your words, I mean, you have the ability to speak life or death. And you can loan your children your strength and let the world remind them of their weaknesses, because it's going to. It's going to constantly show them where they're weak. Let the world remind them of their shortcomings. Because like you, they wake up every single day and they just wonder the same thing you wonder about. They're like, do I have what it takes for today? Am I going to measure up? And so one of the most important things we can do, one of the greatest ways we can show kindness is simply lending our strength, is finding a way to side with them, not against them. This past week, I totally blew this. I mean, totally had just a bad dad moment where my youngest daughter, she had dropped her phone, her device, and just shattered the screen, destroyed the screen. And it wasn't just shattered. I mean, it was like the LED wasn't working, and it was like calling people. Like, you couldn't even control it. It was just like stuck on, and it's like, she put like 40 calls in, voicemails. Like, we had a call to my wife that it made, and it got like 5 minutes of our conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, Julie, we got to get this thing fixed. I mean, we can't say anything in our house that we don't want anyone else to hear, because it just keeps calling. You can't turn it on, can't turn it off. She was devastated by it. And of course, for me, I'd be like, man, I get off that leash for a bit if my phone's destroyed. I'm not gonna have to respond to anything. But for her, I mean, this is like her life. And so I was in the middle of a work day when she dropped it, and she came in. She's like, Dad, this is what happened. I'm like, listen, here's what's going to have to happen. And after we get it fixed, we're going to put this kind of case on. I'm just kind of going through the logistics. And she just walked out of the room with her shoulders down. And all night, she's kind of moping, and I just figured she was kind of just like, down, because I told her we weren't going to be able to get it fixed, for a day or two. And the next morning she came in and she said, Dad, I want to pay for my phone. I'm going to pay for my screen to get fixed tomorrow. Can I pay for it? And I said, what are you talking about? You don't have the funds to pay for this. You don't have a job. And she said, no, I know you're mad at me because I broke my screen. I'm going to pay for it, and I've already thought about what I'm going to do different. And in that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, I said, listen, honey, I'm not mad at you. I'm not mad at you. But as I started reflecting, I thought, I did nothing in that moment to loan her my strength. I mean, I told her all the things that were going to have to happen. I don't know that I told her weakness, but I certainly didn't make her feel great about the moment. And all of a sudden, I said, okay, I got to change my posture right here. And so I said, hey, listen, I'm sorry your phone's damaged. And I know you've got to be disappointed. I can see it in you. I can see it in your demeanor. I know you're disappointed in yourself. And listen, I want to do for you what you can't do for yourself. I'm going to pay for this. We're going to take it. I'm going to take care of it for you. And I sided with her in that moment. Nothing magical. Nothing out of the ordinary. But I'm telling you, it sparked her spirit. I mean, it lifted her spirit right away. I loaned her my strength. And in that moment, I helped her feel strength in that moment instead of be reminded of her mistake, of her failing. Listen, I'm telling you, this can be applied to any interaction. I mean, you can apply this personally. You can apply this in the marketplace. I love how Bishop T.D. Jakes puts it. He says, I've learned to speak without being offensive. I've learned to listen without being defensive, and I always leave your opponent with their dignity. I mean, he's just looking up that our words have enormous power. Everything starts with our words. I mean, think about this. Your next life, the next season of your life, your next move actually starts with your words. It starts with the words you choose to say to yourself and about yourself. It starts with what you say to others. It starts with what you say to your direct reports, with what you say to your family, to your friends, to your neighbors, to your kids. I mean, think about this. When we change what we say, I mean, not only will that spark someone's day or perhaps their week and even their month, but it sparks something in you. And so the first thing we can do when it comes to kindness is we can loan our strength through our words. Second thing we can do is we loan our strength through our deeds. We loan our strength through our deeds. Now, I want to go back to the Apostle Paul here for a moment because, again, this is a guy who wasn't into Jesus and then he changed his mind. He's into Jesus. And after he does that, he starts starting churches all over the Mediterranean rim. And he has this like deep affection for these people that he's leading. I mean, this is one of the places where I get Paul. Like, I mean, he so wants to see the people that he is leading be successful. He's like, I so want you to get this. I want you to know what it's like to thrive in these areas of your life. And so he starts writing these letters and coaching. These people are trying to kind of stumbling through, okay, what does it mean to know Jesus? What's it mean to follow Jesus? And what's it mean to exhibit, to kind of exhibit his reputation of kindness and goodness in the world? And Paul begins to observe something. He begins to notice that there's certain things going on in these people's lives that are kind of getting in the way of them being able to do that. In fact, again, in his book, Atkinson talks about this. He says, as humans, as Christians too, sometimes our hearts can get locked into places of pain and fear caused by our experience in the world, misunderstandings about God, or our own unreasonable expectations of ourselves. Once we become enmeshed in misconceptions, anger, pain, or perfectionism, it can become tough to see ourselves kindly, let alone emit kindness to the world. I think Paul's seeing this. He's like, oh my gosh, this is what's going on right now. We need to get back to the basics. So the Apostle Paul, he kind of reverts back to Jesus' idea we just looked at. This idea of, okay, I got a new idea for it. I just want you to love people the way that I've loved you. And so Paul takes this and he puts some specific words to it. And in one of his letters to this group of Christians, this group of people who are new to their faith in Colossae, here's what he says to them. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people. Now, I want to pause right here for a second because there's something loaded in that first phrase right there. See, so many times we think we choose God or we choose Jesus, right? That we choose if we're going to put the weight of our life into who Jesus is. But what this reminds us is not only do we choose God, but this says, hey, guess what? God chooses you. That God's for you. God's a fan of you. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy, and look at this phrase, dearly loved. He says, I want you to clothe yourself with something. I want you to clothe yourself with compassion. All right? And so this is another derivative of what it means to be kind. And so when we dig into the Greek text, the original language of this verse right here, this word compassion, it has a greater depth than you and I have an understanding of it in our English language. All right, so you and I, when we think about compassion, I mean, we might say things like, I love you with all my heart. All right, that might be the way we express love to someone. But in the Greek culture, they wouldn't say, I love you with all my heart, because that's not where you feel things. All right, instead, and this is a bit gross, all right, the junior high boys are going to like this. They would say something like, all right, I love you with all of my bowels, all right, all my guts, all right, because that's where you feel things. And so what Paul's saying right here is, I want you to clothe yourself with something that every single one of us have experienced. When we see somebody go through something, when we see something that just breaks our heart, when we see somebody that breaks someone else's heart, and we just go, oh, we have that sense, like it's not in our chest, it's not in our heart, it's actually in our gut, it's in our stomach, where you just get this sick to your stomach feeling. He says, I want you to feel it in your bowels. In fact, you should try that when you go home tonight. If you have daughters, just say, hey, honey, I love you with all my bowels tonight. Just see how it goes. I'm sure they're going to love it. All right? But this is what Paul's talking about right here. And so here's what's important. Here's what compassion is. I'll give you another definition right here. Compassion is when you feel what the other person is experiencing. Right? Compassion is when you feel not only see, but when you feel what the other person's experiencing. Which is it's different than saying to, your kids, hey, well, you should have studied harder. I mean, I know that's not the grade you want, but you should have studied harder. That might be a conversation for later, but that's not compassion in the moment. All right? Or saying, hey, sorry, you should have worked harder. I know you didn't get where you wanted, but you kind of got what you deserved. I mean, that's not compassion. It's when you give off this idea of you go, oh my gosh, I I feel it in my gut for you. I can tell that this isn't what you wanted. I'm feeling what you're experiencing. He says, I want you to put this on. I want you to wear this kind of compassion. I want you to clothe yourselves with this. And then he goes on. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion. And then he says, here's our word right here, kindness. And again, what's kindness? Kindness is when you loan your strength to someone else. Kindness is when you extend yourself. Kindness is when you put on this new habit of saying, I'm gonna give people and I'm going to loan people what they need. And somebody walks away and goes, oh my gosh, that you are so kind. That was so kind of you. Why did they say that? You know why? Because it wasn't expected. Because you didn't owe them anything, but you chose to loan out your ability. You chose to loan your strength. You chose to loan your capacity. I'm telling you, there are opportunities to do this every single day. And listen, I'm telling you, when this happens, you spark something amazing. Just like Rodney Smith Jr. did back in 2015 in Huntsville, Alabama. He began something called the 50-yard challenge. And instead of me telling you about it, I want you to hear his version of the story. Take a look at this.
My name is Rodney Smith Jr. I'm the founder of Raising Men and Women's Lawn Care Service, and we mow free lawns for the elderly, disabled, single parents, and veterans. I was in my senior year of college in Huntsville, Alabama, and that's when I came across an elderly man outside mowing his lawn. It looked like he was struggling, so I pulled over and helped him out, and that night I just decided I'll start mowing free lawns. I came up with this idea to travel to all 50 states, mowing free lawns. I realized I could start mowing for different causes to bring more awareness for breast cancer. I customized a lawnmower. I sprayed it all the way pink. I auctioned that lawnmower off. I raised $5,000 mowing with cops. So I had a special lawnmower that looked like a police car. Last year was my 9th 50 state tour. That one was completely for veterans, and I had an American flag mower. Our 50-yard challenge is a challenge that we have issued to kids nationwide and worldwide to mow 50 free lawns in their community. They'll make a sign saying, I accept the 50-yard challenge, and in return we will send them a t-shirt along with safety glasses and ear protection. And once they mow 50 lawns, I drive to wherever they are. I present them a brand new mower, weed eater, and blower. To date, we have about 2,000 kids nationwide, and we also have kids in 8 other different countries. And you got some kids that are starting off mowing, then fall comes around, so they're raking leaves, then winter comes around and they're shoveling snow. So they really have their hands full. And one of the requirements for the 50-yard challenge is kids are responsible for finding their own lawns. So that's another way they can go out in their community and meet people they probably normally wouldn't have met. One kid in particular is a kid named Wesley. When he first signed up, his mom was telling me that he was a shy kid. He always kept to himself. He wasn't that very outgoing, but after he started the 50-yard challenge, he started opening up. He started meeting a lot of veterans where he lived in Michigan, and he formed those relationships. You know, that meant a lot, you know, just to see that this program affected his life in a positive way. So you got kids like that, like Wesley, all over the country. At a young age, I used to mow lawns as a chore, and I disliked it. But God took something I disliked and turned it into something I love to do. And every single day, I get to mow free lawns, and I get to encourage kids around the world to get out there and make a difference one lawn at a time.
Man, how cool is that? Is that not amazing? The 50-yard challenge. And you know what's crazy about that kindness right there is that kindness unlocks kindness. That's what happens. Kindness unlocks kindness. I mean, we heard the story of Wesley right there. Andrew McPeak, he just released a new book called Ready for Real Life. And he talks about another guy named Norris who took on the challenge to mow 50 yards and just seek out his neighbors. And while he was doing this, in his little Louisiana town, he actually got caught by the police. And being caught by the police in his town is a little different than other towns because the local law enforcement had just created this new program when they caught young people doing good in the community, instead of issuing them a citation, as usually you would expect when you get approached by a law enforcement officer, they actually issued them a certificate for a free snow cone just for being kind and doing good in their community. And so Norris, once he got this certificate, within the next week, he completed his 50th yard. And guess what happened? Rodney Smith Jr. showed up at his house. Not only did he show up at his house, but he showed up with a lawnmower, a blower, and a trimmer, and allowed Norris to continue to serve his community and continue to share the kindness. I mean, it's absolutely amazing how kindness unlocks kindness. But see, perhaps the biggest win in the whole thing was that this kindness actually ultimately affected Norris's identity. Because see, when he got involved in serving others, what he began to realize is he began to learn things about himself. He began to learn things like discipline. And began to realize, man, I've got some grit. And he began to pay attention and notice the needs of people in his community. And he began to realize that he actually has control over his attitudes and over his destination. I mean, these are all soft skills. This is what's called emotional intelligence and why it's so needed in our world today. And this all became about because of the spark of kindness. Which is why I believe the Apostle Paul, again, when he's writing these Colossians, he says, whatever you do, he says, whether you're loaning your strength in word, whether you're loaning your strength in deed, he said, just when you do this, you're doing it in the name of Jesus. Listen, what he's saying is you're actually emulating the reputation of Jesus, and that will be a spark for some pretty amazing things. Now, let me just address the elephant in the room for a moment, because I know what some of us are thinking, all right? Because I've thought this a bit myself. All right, now, some of us are thinking through this. You're like, all right, I'm going to loan my strength out. I'm going to load it in word. I'm going to load it in deed. All right, Curt, how am I going to get anything done? All right, I mean, if I'm just like at home with the kids all day, I mean, maybe, but I mean, I can't even give time to that if I'm taking care of the kids. I mean, but if I've got like a demanding job, if I've got metrics I got to meet, if I've got to make sales, if I've got to make sure the marketing's, sharp, if I've got to make sure my contractors are all, hitting their time frames, like how do I do that with kindness? All right, I mean, Curt, this is the stuff that I would expect like a pastor to say. I mean, I get it. I mean, God says it's a good thing, but like how does this work? And I just want you to know I'm with you. I mean, I'm driven. I have metrics. I like to see results. And so I have the same question. And so let me help you through this kind of the way that I have been able to get through this. See, the thing that allows me to lean into what Paul's talking about right here is the guy who says it. All right, the guy who says it, the Apostle Paul, listen, he accomplished more in 3 years than you and I will accomplish in our lifetime. All right, I hate to tell you, but this is a guy, nobody's going to be talking about you 2,000 years from now, likely, all right? I mean, nobody's going to be quoting you, all right? You may have a cool company, you may have a cool app, but I just don't think 2,000 years from now anybody's going to be talking about it, all right? But this guy, the guy who's saying, hey, if you just lead with compassion, with you lead with kindness, you're going to spark something in the world. This is a guy who, traveled all around the Mediterranean on a boat you and I wouldn't even step foot on. This is a guy who goes through dangerous waters. He got beat up. He got stoned with rocks, not, like that kind of thing. I mean, he's a guy who got snake bit. He's shipwrecked not once, not twice, but 3 times. I mean, I could go on, and he starts these churches all around the Mediterranean rim with people who are adverse to God. And yet the reason you and I are here today isn't because of something he wrote down. It's not even because of something he said. It's because of something he did. Because he took on the reputation of his Savior, Jesus, and he said, I'm just going to represent this kind of kindness the way Jesus did. And he did it all without electricity, Advil, or Tylenol. It's amazing. So the point is this is possible. Right? It's not natural, all right? That's why it's a secret power. And so let me ask you, who do you have around you today? Who perhaps in your life just needs a little kindness? And here's the thing as we talk about this. I think all of us want to be kind. I think every single one of us. I mean, every now and then you just find somebody that just wants to be unkind. I think all of us, we want to emulate kindness. But see, I think oftentimes there's something that stands in the way. And I want us to ask ourselves, what is that thing that perhaps stands in the way of me bringing more and more kindness to the world? Perhaps it's margin. I mean, for me, margin's one of those issues. I mean, sometimes I get so busy, I get so consumed and not having bandwidth that I don't have time. I don't have time to loan my strength. I mean, perhaps it's, fear of being taken advantage of. I mean, I know for some of us, like, oh my gosh, if I'm kind, I mean, everybody's going to want something from me. I'm always going to be needed. I'm not going to be able to set boundaries. Maybe the thing that stands in the way is selfishness. I mean, maybe for you, it's just, you're just like, honestly, Curt, if I'm honest, I just don't really pay attention to what other people need. I mean, I'm kind of consumed with myself. I mean, that'll get in the way. Maybe at a deeper level, it's something like bitterness. I mean, maybe, perhaps there's some underlying pain. I mean, there's some things that have just really not gone your way, and you carry that daily, and you just have a hard time. You have a hard time bringing good because of what's happened to you, whether it's within your control or not. Again, I love how Greg Atkinson puts this. He says, kindness is a choice that comes out of the soul that is at peace with itself, a soul that feels free. And what he's really saying is it starts right here. It starts right here. Which the great Henry Nouwen, Dutch priest, great theologian over the years says, he says, as long as we remain resentful about things that we wish had not happened, about relationships that we wish had turned out differently, mistakes we wish we had not made, part of our heart remains isolated, unable, and look at this phrase, to bear fruit. What kind of fruits he's talking about? He's talking about the fruit of joy, of peace, of kindness in the new life ahead. Let me give you a moment to think about this question. I want you to just reflect for a moment. What's the thing that stands in the way of me bringing more and more kindness to the world? And Brad is going to share a song with us here in a moment. I want to tell you about why we're doing this song. When we were in New York City a few weeks ago, Julie and I went to a couple Broadway shows, and we went to a show that wasn't even on our radar. In fact, we won tickets to it through a digital lottery. And when I say won, I mean like cheap tickets, not free tickets. Like we got access to cheaper tickets. And the show was MJ the Musical. And it's a show that I don't know that I would have chose, but after we got tickets, I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. I mean, I love the music of Michael Jackson, and I thought, it'll be a good show, and we'll have a nice night of it. And I tell you what, I was blown away. In fact, I've seen, I think, 5 Broadway shows. Last year we saw Hugh Jackman in Music Man, absolutely amazing. This show topped it. This became my number 1 show I've ever seen. Number 1 show. And it wasn't just the music. I mean, we felt like we'd been to like a Michael Jackson concert. I'm like, I think this guy is Michael. I mean, but Michael's not around anymore. But I mean, he was that good. But I think the thing that really captured me was the depth of the story that the musical told. And throughout the musical, they started early in Michael's life when he was part of the Jackson 5, and how, he and his brothers went out on tour, and you began to get a picture of some of the pain that really shaped his life in his later years. And a lot of it came from his father. A lot of it came from the way his father was so driving, because his words are like at 500 pounds. He never felt good enough. He was always reminded of his weaknesses, always reminded of his mistakes. And then it progressed to his middle-aged years and his young adult life, and in that version of Michael, he actually had to fire his dad as his manager because they just couldn't work together. And again, it just continued to heap pain into his life. And then it progressed all the way to the end of him navigating, even in his later years, of some of the pain of his addiction and him just being stuck and not feeling like he could be who he was created to be. And there's one of the most powerful moments that I never connected the dots on. So I'm sitting in this playhouse watching this musical, and they bring the young Michael and the young adult Michael and the adult Michael together, and they start singing this song. And as they're singing this to each other, they've got their father over their shoulder reminding them of how they don't measure up. And you're never going to amount to anything. And if you don't do this, man, you're certainly not going to be successful. And as you think about what's the thing that stands between me and the kind of kindness I want to bring in the world, perhaps it starts with a change that begins in you. Here's the song.
I'm gonna make a change for once in my life. It's gonna feel real good. It's gonna make a difference. It's gonna make it right. As I turn up the collar on my favorite winter coat, this wind is blowing my mind. I see the kids in the streets, not enough to read. Who am I to be blind, pretending not to see their need? I'm summer's disregard, I'm broken bottle top, and a one-man soul. They follow each other on the wind, you know, 'cause they got nowhere to go. That's why I want you to know I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. No message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, so take a look at yourself and then make a change. Na 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 na. I've been a victim of a selfish kind of love. It's time that I realize there's some with no home, not a nickel alone. Could it be really me pretending that they're not alone? A willow deeply scarred, somebody's broken heart, and a washed out dream. They follow the pattern of the wind, you see, 'cause they got no place to be. That's why I'm starting with me. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. No message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, so take a look at yourself and then make a change. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. No message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, so take a look at yourself and then make a change. Woo! Woo! Na 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 na. Oh. Na 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 na. Na 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 na.
Hey, let's pray together. God, first of all, thank you for your kindness that it just is so ridiculous to us. And as we sit in this moment, we think about, well, what's the thing standing between us and us bringing and reflecting that kind of kindness in the world? We want to start right here. In fact, the whole idea of, the great commandment, love you, love others, it's actually a three-dimensional idea. It really starts with loving ourselves and giving ourselves the kind of grace and the kind of kindness that you exhibit to us. And so as we think about what that means for us, as we think about maybe the change, whether it's in our bandwidth or maybe some change in our focus and getting outside of ourselves, or perhaps there's even some trauma. Maybe there's some things we just need a healing, a salve, a cleansing of, because we're dealing with some resentment, some bitterness. God, I just pray that your Spirit would sweep through and do that work right now. And Father, there's perhaps even some of us that we know the very first step for us to move in this direction is to take a step to you, to actually acknowledge how good and how kind you really are. And perhaps we're seeing that for the very first time, and we just want to step into that right now. If that's you, you want to take a step into receiving God's goodness, receiving his grace, it can happen right now. You can just say, yes, Jesus, I want to know your goodness. I want to know your grace. I want to know your forgiveness. I want to know your kindness. Thank you for being so kind. And then even when I don't get it, even continuing to be kind. And God, I just pray that we would experience that and be reminded that as you receive us, we receive you. And that kindness never stops. And so God, I just pray that Spirit would be developed in us, that you would grow that Spirit in us so that we would embody this whole idea of kindness and goodness and compassion in our world. Because we know when that happens, man, it sparks some pretty amazing things. So thank you. Thank you for modeling this in your reputation to us. Amen. 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 I tell you what, if you took a step to receive from God for the first time, perhaps, we'd love to know that. We'd love to celebrate that with you. So let us know that on your connection card. And as we end, I want you to go ahead and stand with us. We're going to sing a song as we get out of here that kind of invites that spirit to come. And I want to just give you one more story of just how simple this is. All right, you have opportunities all around you. This week, our team was meeting out in the Commons in one of our team meetings on Monday, and we had a lot of stuff in and out of the building, a number of meetings, finance meeting. We had a local business that was coming in and using some space. And in the midst of a lot of activity, a mom and her 2 kids walked through the front doors of Crosspoint, and man, she just looked like heavy. She's had a weight to her. And I was in the middle of a meeting. My assistant walked out, Amy, and she just, talked with her, and, the kids did some things, and I got back in my meeting, and then I saw them kind of walking out the door later. And so when I came back around, I said, hey, Amy, what was going on there? I mean, everything okay with that family? She said, oh, yeah, they just wanted to use the bathroom. I'm like, oh, that's it? She's like, yeah, they'd been turned away 3 times of places up and down Oleo Road that wouldn't let them use their bathroom. She's like, by all means, use our bathroom. I mean, listen, there are opportunities for kindness all around you. The key is, are we willing to allow our hands, our hearts, our lives, and God's Spirit to actually continue to help us reflect that in our community? So, hey, let's be that kind of people. I'm telling you, pay attention this week. It will spark something kind of amazing. So let's sing this together.
Our lives, our hearts, our hands, we're reaching out to see you move again. We can hardly wait. Come flood this place. We're ready now. It's all about to change. Let your kingdom come. Let your will be done. Let your fire fall. Let your fire fall. Open the heavens. Pour your spirit out on us. Unleash your presence. Jesus, come alive in us. Open the this time, this place, it's yours. Unlock the gates and open up the doors. Let your kingdom come, let your will be done. Let your fire fall, let your fire fall. Open the heavens. Pour your spirit out on us. Unleash your presence. Jesus, come alive in us. Open the Darkness trembles, mountains shake. One was dead, now comes awake. Every captive breaking free. Right now, right now, right now. Darkness trembles, mountains shake. One was dead, now comes awake. Every captive breaking free. Right now, right now, right now. Open the heavens. Pour your spirit out on us. Unleash your presence. Jesus, come alive in us. Open the
That's our prayer for you this week. Not only that you would experience more and more of God's Spirit and goodness, but you would be encouraged, because when more and more of God's Spirit is alive in you, I can assure you that your world and our world will be a better place. Now, if you made the choice today to take advantage of the goodness and grace that Jesus brings to us by taking a step to trust Him as your Savior and leader, we'd love to celebrate that with you. So let us know on your connection card. And if you'd like someone to pray with you today, simply text the keyword "need prayer" to 317-834-7373. And a member of our prayer team will be in touch with you today. For those of you who are givers, I just want to say thank you. You make all of this possible with your generosity through the Joy Box. And if you want to become a giver, you can go to the Give button at the top of the screen or crosspointweb.org/give, and know that when you do that, you're empowering this message and all the crazy goodness and hope that comes out of this place. I personally want to thank you for that. All right, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time at Crosspoint Online.